Holiday betrayal. My wife said they'd do Christmas with X as our girl needed her real dad. A stranger, leave I left. Week later, she regretted it. What if the deepest love you've ever known, a bond you built brick by brick, could be so easily erased by 5 chilling words? Because for me, those words didn't just break my heart, they shattered my entire world. The air in the Sydney airport lounge felt thin, almost artificial, a stark contrast to the churning despair in my gut. Outside, beneath the vast, indifferent sky, my old life was shrinking, fading into a blur 30,000 feet below. But this story, this crushing chapter, doesn't begin with me leaving. It starts with a little girl, a handmade dollhouse, and 6 incredible years where she called me Daddy Ethan. My name's Ethan. I'm 42, and for the past 15 years, I've worked at a paper mill in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'm the kind of guy who fixes things, keeps his head down, doesn't make waves. I married Chloe when her daughter, Sophia, was 3. And that little girl, she became my entire universe in ways I never even knew were possible. Every Saturday morning, we'd be in the garage, tinkering. Her tiny hands holding the flashlight steady, her eyes wide with curiosity as I explained why you always measure twice and cut once. She'd listen like I was unraveling the very secrets of the cosmos. That dollhouse, though, that was our masterpiece. 3 whole months we spent on it. Proper wood, real shingles, tiny working shutters she painstakingly painted purple, because, of course, that was her favorite color. When we finally finished, she threw her arms around my neck, squeezing so tight, and whispered, "You're the best daddy ever." And I remember thinking, right then, that nothing in my life had ever felt so perfectly, completely right. Chloe was different. Always had been, I suppose. Reserved, distant, the kind of person who lived in the same house but seemed to inhabit a completely different dimension. She worked hospital scheduling, came home exhausted most nights. Her phone was her constant companion during dinner, and she was always in bed early. We coexisted, yes, but somewhere along the way, we stopped being a married couple. I didn't push it. Not really. Because Sophia was happy, and that's what truly mattered, keeping things stable, peaceful for her. Then came December. 3 weeks before Christmas. Chloe dropped the bomb on me over breakfast, while Sophia was upstairs getting ready for school. She said it so casually, like she was discussing the weather. Told me she and Sophia would be spending Christmas with her ex-husband, Bradley. Said Sophia needed time with her biological father. My coffee cup, halfway to my lips, felt like a lead weight. My brain, though, it was just static. Complete, deafening static. I managed to ask, "Are you seriously taking our daughter to spend Christmas with a man who walked out when she was 2 and barely remembers her birthday most years?" Chloe just looked at me. Her eyes were cold, like chips of ice. She said, "She needs her real father, Ethan. If you don't like it, divorce me." The way she spat out real father. Like I was just some random guy who happened to live there. Like 6 years of bedtime stories, of scraped knees kissed better, of parent-teacher conferences, of every single small, significant moment, meant absolutely nothing. I didn't argue. Didn't yell. Didn't slam a door. Something inside me just snapped. Went quiet. It was that awful, hollow feeling when you realize you've been fighting for something that's already been lost. I went to work that day. Sat in my truck during lunch, staring blankly at nothing. And that's when I remembered an email I'd been ignoring for months. The company had been offering transfers to their facility in Perth, Australia. Specialists who knew the old machinery, better pay, housing allowance, the whole package. I'd turned it down 3 times. How do you move a family halfway across the world? But sitting there in that desolate parking lot, Chloe's words echoing in my head, I realized I'd been putting my own life on hold for people who didn't actually want me in theirs. I walked straight into my supervisor's office and told him I'd take the Australia position, if it was still available. He looked genuinely surprised, asked if I was sure, if my family was on board. I just nodded. What was I supposed to say? That evening, I came home. Chloe was packing Sophia's suitcase. Sophia, meanwhile, was buzzing with excitement because Daddy Bradley, her real daddy, apparently, had promised her a big Christmas. She asked if I was coming too, and I had to tell her no, that I had work stuff to handle. The look of disappointment on her sweet face nearly killed me. But I kept my expression neutral, a carefully constructed mask. Chloe didn't ask about my day. Didn't notice that something fundamental, irrevocably broken, had shifted. She just reminded me they'd be gone for 10 days. The week before they left, I moved through life like I was underwater. Finishing paperwork at work, sorting out my affairs. The night before they flew out, I sat in Sophia's room after she fell asleep. I just watched her breathe, memorizing her face, every tiny detail. My eyes drifted to the little purple dollhouse on her dresser, our dollhouse, the one we'd built together. Christmas Eve. I was alone in the silent house. I put on It's a Wonderful Life, our family tradition. Sat there in the dark, watching George Bailey realize his life mattered. How ironic, I thought, that mine apparently didn't. At midnight, I opened my laptop and sent the acceptance email. Told them I could start mid-January. Asked them to arrange the fastest transfer possible. Christmas Day, Chloe called from Bradley's place. She sounded happy. Happier than I'd heard her in years. Told me they were having a great time, that Sophia was bonding with her real family. She didn't ask how I was spending Christmas. I didn't tell her about Australia. Just said I was glad they were having fun, and hung up. When they came back on the 27th, Chloe seemed different. More confident, almost serene, like she'd finally made up her mind about something. Sophia was quieter than usual. She didn't run to hug me like she always did. That night, after Sophia was in bed, I told Chloe about the transfer. That I was leaving in 2 weeks. I watched her face, searching for any flicker of emotion. She just nodded. Well, I guess that makes things easier, she said, and went back to scrolling on her phone. The next 2 weeks were surreal. Packing up my life, saying goodbye to coworkers who honestly seemed more upset about me leaving than my own wife did. Sophia asked questions I couldn't really answer. Why was I going so far away? When would I be back? Could she come visit? I told her I'd send letters and presents. That I'd video call whenever I could. But I could see it in her eyes, she thought I was abandoning her, just like Bradley had. My last night in Cedar Rapids, I drove past the paper mill, past Sophia's school, past all the places that had been my life for 15 years. I felt nothing. Just this strange, empty calm. The flight to Australia was 30 hours, with layovers. Somewhere over the vast Pacific Ocean, it hit me. I hadn't cried. Not once. Hadn't broken down, hadn't fallen apart. I'd just gone quiet and made a choice. And now I was living with it. Perth was everything Cedar Rapids wasn't. Quiet, organized, full of people who actually seemed to mean it when they said good morning. The company set me up in this sterile, white-walled apartment near the plant. No memories clinging to the furniture, no ghosts in the corners. Just quiet. For the first 2 weeks, I worked and slept. Tried not to think about what I'd left behind. The job was exactly as promised, specialized maintenance on old machinery no one else knew how to fix. My coworkers respected that. They treated me like I actually knew what I was doing. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, go to work, come home, make dinner, then sit on my balcony watching the sun set over the Indian Ocean. And the whole time, there was this nagging voice in my head, asking if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I tried reaching out to Sophia constantly. Sent her messages through the iPad I'd gotten her for her birthday. Told her about the kangaroos I'd seen, about how different everything looked, about how much I missed our Saturday projects. Complete radio silence. I told myself, maybe Chloe was just keeping her busy. Maybe she needed time to adjust. After 3 weeks, I sent a package. Australian candy, a stuffed koala, this little wooden kangaroo I'd carved myself, because I remembered how much she loved the duck I'd made her last spring. I paid extra for tracking. Watched it get delivered to the house in Cedar Rapids. And then, nothing. No thank you text, no photo, not a single word. And that's when the guilt, a raw, gnawing thing, truly set in. Because what if Chloe was right? What if leaving had made me exactly like Bradley? Just another father figure who'd walked away when things got hard? I started having dreams. Sophia was calling for me, but I couldn't reach her. I'd show up at the house, and it was empty. My supervisor noticed I was off. Asked if everything was okay. I told him it was an adjustment. Then came the photo. Early February. And that's when everything crashed down around me. My buddy Kevin from the mill sent me a message. Just 5 words, "Man, I'm sorry. Thought you should know." Attached was a picture. It was from one of those mall photo booths. Chloe, Sophia, and Bradley. All dressed in matching sweaters. Looking like a perfect little family. Bradley had his arm around Chloe. Chloe was smiling, a radiant, genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. And Sophia was between them. But here's what absolutely gutted me, she wasn't smiling. Not really. She had this hollow, distant look in her eyes. A look I recognized, because I'd seen it in my own mirror for weeks. I stared at that photo for an hour. Zoomed in. Noticed the date. It was from last week. This wasn't just a Christmas thing. This was ongoing. They were playing house while I was on the other side of the world. My hands shaking, I called Chloe that night. When she picked up, she sounded annoyed, like I was interrupting something incredibly important. I asked about the photo. What was going on? She got defensive immediately. Told me I'd made my choice when I took the Australia job. Said Sophia needed stability, and Bradley was providing that. I asked to talk to Sophia. Chloe said she was already asleep. Which was weird, because it was only 7 p.m. there. When I pushed back, her voice went ice cold. You gave up the right to make demands when you abandoned us, she snapped, and hung up. I tried calling back. Nothing. Texting. Nothing. I tried reaching Sophia's iPad and realized I'd been blocked. That's when panic truly set in. Real, visceral panic. Because I'd left to preserve what little dignity I had left, but I had never intended to lose Sophia completely. I called a lawyer the next morning. A family law guy in Cedar Rapids that Kevin recommended. Laid out the whole messy situation. He was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low, a tone that made my blood run cold. Mr. Halverson, you need to understand something. Your wife filed for divorce 2 weeks after you left. Turns out, Chloe had filed in late January, citing abandonment and neglect. She documented that I'd moved to another country without discussing custody, had meticulously painted a picture of me as someone who'd chosen career over family. The lawyer told me she was trying to establish Bradley as Sophia's primary father figure. That she'd even enrolled Sophia in counseling, specifically to document the trauma of my leaving. She was building a case to cut me out completely. I asked what my options were. He was brutally honest. From Australia, with no custody agreement in place? Not many. Family courts don't look kindly on parents who leave the country, even if the situation is complicated. He said the hearing was scheduled for late May. That I had about 3 months to build a defense, but I needed to be physically present in Iowa to have any real chance. I hung up and just sat there in my apartment. This place, which had felt like a fresh start, was actually a trap I'd walked right into. Chloe had played this perfectly. She pushed me into leaving, documented everything, and turned my desperate attempt to preserve my dignity into damning evidence of abandonment. I checked my bank account that afternoon. Found Chloe had tried to withdraw everything from our joint savings, $23,000 we'd been putting away for years. The only reason it hadn't gone through was because the bank flagged it as suspicious. I called them immediately, got it locked down, moved half into a separate account because the lawyer said that was the legal thing to do. Chloe called 2 hours later, screaming about how I was trying to leave her and Sophia with nothing. I just let her yell. There was no point defending myself anymore. When she finally stopped to breathe, I said, very calmly, "I'm coming back, Chloe. We're going to figure this out in court." I could hear the shock in her silence before she managed, "You can't just come back. You have a job there." I told her I'd already talked to my supervisor, that they'd agreed to let me work remotely temporarily, that I'd be back in Iowa within 2 weeks. And then I hung up. The guilt I'd been carrying shifted into something else during that flight back. Something colder, sharper, and far more focused. Because I wasn't going back to save my Maria. Gee, that was dead and buried. I was going back for Sophia. For that little girl who'd called me Daddy Ethan, who'd built a dollhouse with me, and who had trusted me completely until I, unwittingly, let her down. The plane touched down in Chicago for my layover. I bought a coffee and sat, watching families move past. Dads carrying kids on their shoulders, moms holding little hands. And I thought about how much I needed my daughter to know I hadn't abandoned her. That I was still her daddy, Ethan, even if her mother and Bradley were trying to write me out of the story. Cedar Rapids in late February looked exactly how I felt, gray, cold, and utterly unwelcome. I landed on a Tuesday morning and went straight to a motel. There was no way I was sleeping in that house. My lawyer's office was downtown, in a building that smelled of old coffee and fresh stress. When I walked in, he looked relieved, like he'd half expected me not to show. We spent 4 hours going through everything. Bank statements, text messages, emails, phone records, building a meticulous timeline of exactly what had happened and when. He told me the custody hearing was set for May 23rd. Chloe's lawyer was pushing for full custody, with supervised visitation for me at best, arguing I was a flight risk since I'd already left the country once. I asked what our chances were. He leaned back. "Ethan, it depends on what we can prove. You've got financial records and work history showing you've been a committed parent, but she's got the abandonment narrative and the fact that you're not Sophia's biological father. Which means you have no automatic legal rights here." That made my stomach drop. I'd been so focused on being her dad that I'd forgotten, in the eyes of the law, I was just a stepfather. He said we needed to establish a clear pattern of parental involvement before I left. Prove that Chloe had engineered my departure and document her parental alienation over the past 2 months. We had 12 weeks to do it. That afternoon, I started making rounds. First, to the bank, where I got statements showing every single deposit to Sophia's college fund, every payment for her school activities, every purchase for birthdays and holidays. Then to the school, where I talked to her teacher, Ms. Davies. She remembered me from parent-teacher conferences and volunteer days. She looked uncomfortable when I explained what was happening, but admitted that Sophia had been struggling since I left. Her grades had dropped, she'd become withdrawn, stopped participating. I asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement. She hesitated, but finally agreed. "That little girl talked about you constantly, Mr. Halverson," she said, her voice soft. "You were her hero." Hearing that past tense nearly broke me all over again. The school counselor was next, Ms. Jensen. When I explained the situation, she told me she'd received a subpoena from Chloe's lawyer and would be testifying at the hearing, but couldn't discuss the specifics of Sophia's sessions with me directly due to confidentiality. What she could tell me was that she'd be providing her professional observations to the court. The way she said it, careful, but meaningful, gave me a flicker of hope that maybe the truth was more complicated than Chloe's version. I rented a small apartment on the north side. Nothing fancy, just a place to sleep while I built my case. Every night, I'd sit there, making lists. Every soccer game I'd attended, every school project I'd helped with, every nightmare I'd comforted her through. Trying to quantify 6 years of fatherhood into evidence a judge would accept. Kevin stopped by one evening with pizza. Told me Chloe had been spreading stories around town, saying I'd abandoned my family for a job in Australia, that I'd never really loved Sophia, that Bradley was stepping up to be the father she'd always needed. I asked if people believed her. He just shrugged. Some do, some don't. Small towns, you know. But the people who actually know you aren't buying it. Over the next 10 weeks, I threw myself into building the strongest case possible. My lawyer got Bradley's financial records through discovery. Found out he was 4 months behind on child support from his first marriage, had 2 DUIs in the past 5 years. His stability wasn't quite as solid as Chloe was claiming. We documented every blocked call, every refused video chat, every returned letter, building a pattern of parental alienation that even a skeptical judge would have to acknowledge. I drove past Sophia's school a few times, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but I never had the courage to actually approach. I knew it would only complicate things legally. The weeks crawled by. March into April into May. The whole time, I was terrified that I'd come all this way and still lose her. 2 days before the hearing, I finally let myself drive by the house. Our house, technically, though it didn't feel like mine anymore. The driveway was empty, but I could see through the window that the living room had been rearranged. New furniture, different curtains. Like they were erasing any trace of me ever being there. I sat in my truck across the street for 20 minutes, just staring. And then I saw her. Sophia. Walking past the window, carrying something. Even from that distance, I could see she looked smaller somehow, like she'd folded in on herself. I wanted to jump out. To run to her. But I knew that would destroy everything I'd been working toward. So, I just sat there, watching, until she disappeared from view. And then I drove away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just lay in bed, thinking about how tomorrow would determine everything. Whether I'd get to be her father again, or whether Chloe and Bradley would succeed in writing me out of her life completely. The courthouse the next morning was exactly what you'd expect: marble floors, uncomfortable wooden benches, lawyers hustling between courtrooms. Chloe showed up with Bradley, both dressed impeccably. She looked confident, almost smug, like this was already decided. She didn't even glance at me when they walked past, just kept her eyes forward, as if I wasn't worth acknowledging. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder. Remember, stay calm. Answer honestly. Let the evidence speak. Then the bailiff called us to order, and the judge walked in, a stern woman in her 60s who'd apparently seen every custody fight imaginable. The next 4 hours were brutal. Chloe's lawyer painted me as an abandoner who'd prioritized career over family, who'd left without warning, who had no legal standing as a non-biological parent anyway. My lawyer countered with financial records, with testimony from Ms. Davies and neighbors, with phone logs showing my blocked attempts at contact, with evidence of Chloe's parental alienation and Bradley's questionable history. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge said she wanted to speak with Sophia privately in her chambers. 45 minutes later, they came back out. Sophia's eyes were red from crying. But when she looked at me, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Recognition. And maybe, hope. The judge sat down, reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Then she spoke. And I'll never forget what she said. I've been doing this job for 23 years, and I've learned that biology doesn't make you a parent. Showing up does. And sometimes, the people who fight hardest for children are the ones who chose to be their parents, rather than the ones who simply are. She granted me primary physical custody. Ordered a formal custody evaluation to be completed within 60 days to finalize arrangements. Mandated family therapy for Sophia to process everything. And ordered Chloe to pay my legal fees due to her documented parental alienation. She also issued a temporary restraining order preventing Chloe from interfering with my contact with Sophia pending the final evaluation. The courtroom went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then Chloe started yelling about appeals, about how this wasn't over. But I wasn't listening. Because Sophia had pulled away from Chloe's grip. She was walking toward me. Slowly at first, then faster. And then she was running. And I was meeting her halfway. She crashed into me, burying her face in my shirt, saying, "I knew you didn't leave me, Daddy Ethan." I knew it, over and over again. We went to my apartment that afternoon. Not the house where we'd built the dollhouse, but somewhere new. Somewhere we could start over. I made her favorite dinner while she sat at the counter, telling me about everything I'd missed. About school and friends, and how confused she'd been when I left. How Chloe had told her I'd chosen Australia over her, but she said, "I never quite believed it, Daddy Ethan." That night, I tucked her into the guest room that was now her room. She held onto my hand and asked, "Can we build something this weekend, like we used to?" And I told her we could build anything she wanted. After she fell asleep, I sat in the living room, exhausted and relieved, still processing how close I'd come to losing her forever. How different this could have ended if I hadn't fought back. On the small bookshelf across the room, I spotted something that stopped me cold. That little wooden kangaroo I'd carved in Perth and sent in the package months ago. She must have grabbed it from the house before we left. Seeing it there felt like proof. Proof that even when everything else fell apart, some connections are stronger than distance or lies or time. And that being a father isn't about biology or geography. It's about showing up. Even when everything tells you to walk away. What do you think about this story? Have you ever had to fight for a love that wasn't biologically yours? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.